Get ready to dive into the world of AV production. If you've ever wondered about the magic behind event layouts, renderings, and the behind the scenes work that brings events to life, you're in the right place.
Welcome to the Events Demystified podcast, where we demystify the world of in-person, virtual, and hybrid events, AV production, and AI technology by sharing practical tips, tricks, and strategies to help your event succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Treefan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency that caters to event professionals, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. We specialize in AV and AI education, integration, automation, and implementation, all based on our Fit for Events framework, which focuses on futuristic AV production, innovative AI technology, thriving audiences, and empowering behind-the-scenes teams. And I'm your host, Anka Platon Treefan, with over 2 decades of hands-on experience in event production, event management, and now AI technologies and cybersecurity.
Welcome to another episode of the EventsDemystified podcast. I'm your host, Anka Platon Trifan, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with someone who knows the in and outs of AV production like no other. Today's guest is Jacob WP Ramey. Jacob leads a team that specializes in designing and producing unforgettable experiences for a wide range of events. With a passion for technology and a keen eye for detail, Jacob has become a go-to expert in creating immersive AV setups, accurate event renderings, and seamless layouts that transform any space into an experience. So, without further ado, let's bring our guest in.
Hi there.
Welcome to the show. I am so thrilled to have you here. I love my rookie mistake there. I literally started the episode without pressing record, and I don't think that's happened in a very long time. And I saw you laughing. I'm like, well, welcome to the show.
That's okay.
So awesome to have you. Actually, Jacob and I were going to have a live stream, but then life and events got in the way. And then we're like, okay, how about we just do a podcast recording? Is because that feels less pressured and time sensitive.
Yes.
And here we are doing that. So I'm so ready to jump right in. What inspired you to get into AV? That's one question I get asked all the time, but I'm curious to hear the other stories, and also how did you develop your current experience in event renderings and all the things that you do now in your current position?
Yeah, it definitely hasn't been a straight shot. I've been very grateful to be at the right place at the right time. I started in traditional theater. I went to school at Otterbein University for lighting design and production management. I actually made it all the way to the Goodman Theater to apprentice under TJ Gherkins, who's my lighting mentor. Had a great experience there. And then in kind of that process, the first agency I ever worked for called me and said, "Do you want to put a suit on and drive scenic for a financial company across the nation and build it for us?" I had interned with them in college, and it kind of just took off from there. I started as an assistant technical director, moved up to technical director, then found a passion for video, started doing video engineering work, still always doing lighting design in the background, but hard to be a full-time lighting designer and, live certain lifestyles with a family and things like that. So really got into working production and learning everything I could about it. The only thing that I haven't worked really a lot in is audio, and that's very intentional because lighting designers have beef with audio people. But other than that,
I thought that was video people and audio not getting along.
we all don't get along, honestly. No, a lot of the audio guys I work with are great. Just starting as a lighting guy, I have dabbled in audio, but not enough. I know enough to be dangerous, is what I like to say.
All right. I'm going to have to correct you though. When you say audio guys, we're going to have to reverse that and say audio techs, because as
Audio,
an audio
yes,
engineer,
yes.
as an
Audio
audio
people,
engineer,
audio tech.
I cannot tell you how many times I hear this audio guy here, audio guy there. I'm like, wait a
Yeah.
second. There's
That's a
actually
good
many
call
forms
out.
of audio technicians that
Thank you.
this
Yes,
industry employs, and we need to highlight that because
absolutely.
otherwise especially for someone that's new to the industry. And as a female that's been in the industry for 20 years, I'll tell you, it's not conducive for a welcoming environment. And a lot of women do struggle with feeling like they belong, especially when they're not included, even in the verbiage, even in the
Yeah.
language that we sometimes use, intentionally or not. Unfortunately, a lot of this is not intentional. It just comes out, right? But it's enough to leave an
Yeah.
impression. So that being said, I laugh because I started as audio, and then COVID turned me into a video engineer. And it's like you said, like you don't just switch paths, you go with it and just really, really dial that in. But I feel like after COVID, so many of us had to wear so many different hats that it's
Absolutely.
no longer just one clear path anymore. And if you're in AV production, you're going to do a lot of different things. You're going to become an expert in one area, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a general idea of other areas as well. And many times, actually being able to do two things really, really well as well, which is great because that makes you a valuable team member. So,
Absolutely.
to what you said, lighting is very creative. I started in lighting in the very beginning, which is what attracted me to lighting in the first place. But it's not a place where you can earn enough of an
Yeah.
income to actually survive in this world. So that's when you start learning other things. So for you, I feel like it's actually gone into video, but then more than that, it went into event renderings. And one of the
Yeah.
things I really specialize in is layouts, diagrams, which if you ask any event planner and any meeting planner out there, they're crucial to events. Can you explain in your own words how all those components fit together into the bigger picture of event production, and maybe what tools or processes do you use to create them?
Yeah, and first, thank you for calling me out on that. I think it is so critical to use the right language. So, my apologies on that. I have some industry slip ups that I have to work on myself, but definitely want to be inviting for all people
Yeah.
to be a part of the AV and event space. I think it's really important to talk with the entire team and the client about expectations going in. And then I really try to insist on a site visit where we can physically walk into the space and look around and see all the curveballs
Yeah.
that can happen, how low the chandelier is, how there's an awkward air pocket wall, that kind of thing. And then, I believe that drafting and putting a ground plan together and then eventually the rendering is like kind of putting together the treasure map of where we're trying to get to. That's the X on the map. We may make changes along the route, but we're still trying to get to the same vision. And I think the more advanced work you can do and the more accurate your ground plans, renderings, all of the things you're showing the client, it gives you a better expectation walking in the door. I'm a big fan of no surprises, and that's actually one of the companies that I work for's motto is no surprises guarantee. We want to show you exactly what you're getting into, what you get to play with, and what are all of the tools and the abilities that the gear can do for you. And it's kind of beyond the gear of like what's the experience for the attendee the second that they walk in the door. So I start generally with a sketch, sometimes just a napkin sketch of how are you feeling about this? Do you want the stage in the round? Do you want the stage three quarters? How invested do you want to be with the audience? What are your speakers like? Do they like to walk around and get engaged with the people? Are they podium clingers that we need to give them a reason to walk out, give them a runway, for example? So getting to know the client kind of from their core level of how they like to present. Then I start with the stage, and then we start filling in technical elements based on budget and other factors of what we can do to be most conservative with their money with still showing something really impressive and unique. I don't believe that this industry lends itself to cookie cutter shows. Like everyone wants their own experience. And that's kind of my job from day one is to put the ground plan together, show them some renderings that kind of get their creative juices flowing. It's not very often that the first rendering is perfect. They say, oh, I like this. We do two or three at a time. Well, let's take a piece of the third rendering and put it into the second rendering so that we can really put this in the way that we like it. And understanding the client's values and brand becomes critical in that because design for the sake of design achieves nothing. When we're
Yeah.
doing renderings like that, it's more about capturing that imagination from the client that goes, wow, this really represents what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to show my audience, and what I want them to experience.
Absolutely. I think it's important to highlight something that you said earlier, which is if you're planning an event, make sure you do a venue run through. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many times we had to almost fight the client on this because they're like, no, we don't need a venue walkthrough. We've done this so many times. We've been in this space so many times. And I kid you not, there was actually one event and we were in that venue many times before, but between their spring gala and their fall event, the venue decided to put on this humongous chandelier. That was a
Mhm.
beautiful chandelier.
Yep.
But it completely threw off all of our original layouts, like where the screens were going to be, where the projectors, we were using long throw projection and the screens were flat on the wall. So we had to have, projection towers in the back and then just go straight to the projector screens. However, with this new chandelier in the way, like multiple chandeliers in the way, you could no longer go a straight shot. You
Hmm.
had to maneuver, and now one screen was perfectly aligned to the stage, to the wall. The other one had to be moved, I don't know where, and it was just not an ideal setup. And it goes back to lesson learned. And this is when also the client realized, yes, you are so right. It's so important to have those walkthroughs. And this is just one simple, silly example. But how many times, you walked into a space thinking that venue CAD drawing is accurate and this is the visual of what we're walking into. And then you realize there's actually this one pillar in the way that for some reason it's either not part of
Yep.
the diagram or like something happened and is needed now or something. And now you're like, we got to work around it. Or that one pillar that we thought was just one simple beam, it's actually humongous.
Yeah.
It takes a
Yeah.
lot of space and it takes visual considerations. Another thing I want to highlight, and this is something that I would like you to go a little bit into more depth, is how when it comes to renderings, I feel like there's technical renderings and then there are design renderings. So let's make the distinction when technical rendering is used and how and for what reasons versus a design rendering that probably has to do with the set design, with the stage, and all the other elements.
Yeah, I mean, great call out. So a lot of my job today as an in-house technical director is to look at the conceptual renderings that creatives make for their scenic and decide whether it's possible in the realm of physics.
Mm-hmm.
I argue that they should be kind of made simultaneously. Like, I don't want to stop creatives from being creative, certainly, but I do want to make sure that they're not showing a client something that's physically impossible.
Right.
So I think it's at least in the agency that I work on, it's a really team effort of here's the design that I'm working on so far. Jacob, can you draw it in real life and make sure it fits? And I want to go back for just a second that venue CADs, venue social tables, and venue websites, all three of those could have very different measurements on them.
Yes.
So I've always said that it's more expensive to find out on site when we're loading in than it is to go and do a site visit. So that usually convinces the client that it's a good idea that the experts that they're hiring are saying, let's go and meet there and walk the space, because there's no substitute really for being in the room. But going back to the rendering thing, it's not the creative's job to think about all of the power and the rigging and the how things are standing up and how much space there is. They're just conceptualizing. But I do think it's important that they run it by someone technical before it goes to the client, because it's all about setting expectations. If you're in a room that can't fit 100 tiles of LED wall because the floor can't support it, and you show them a super ultra wide LED wall that'll fall through the floor, it's a team effort. I've had a lot of experiences where I've said, "How is this floating? There's no rigging points in the room," and they're like, "Oh,
Right.
we didn't think about that. How do we ground
Right.
support it?" Well, it won't look like this if you ground support it. So I think it has to come from a place of discussion, but it also can't. What I've seen a lot in my career is technical people smashing down creatives' ideas. My goal is to find something that fits as close to what the creative is doing as possible, while still making it structural, the integrity of the structure. The goal is not to devalue the creative journey, and it's to find the solution. In my opinion, it's to find the solution that best fits what their first concept looks like. Excuse me. We don't,
Absolutely.
at least where I'm at, we try our best not to show a client something that hasn't been done a proof of concept. So it can be the most beautiful rendering in the world. We have to proof it out. We have to price it out. We have to make sure that it fits within all the parameters that the clients put in front of us. And then we'll present it to them and get them excited about it. But it cannot be hey, here's the greatest idea in the world. Well, the room, it won't fit, or the room's not tall enough, or whatever. And it's, again, my job is not to be the person that naysays the creative. It's to wrangle them back into reality and come up with a really cool concept together.
Totally. So that's where it goes to like how important precision is in your work and in making sure that whatever it is going to be planned for this event makes sense. I'm curious, do you have any examples where there were some consequences to the fact that that didn't happen or things didn't go according to plan and then it needed to be adjusted on site one way or
Yeah.
another?
Yeah, actually, just recently, it wasn't anything to do with the rendering process. It had all to do with not doing a site visit. The ceiling
Again,
measurement,
here we go.
right? The measurements were not accurate by 6 inches, give or take. So the screens were drawn and rendered right up to the ceiling, where we were instructed by the venue and by their CADs and by all of their paperwork. But the ceiling was not that height when I put the laser on the floor. So we had to lower the projection screen legs, and we found a great solution that made it all work. But it took time. We had built the screens and flipped them up, and then, oh hey, they're catching on, we can't get any higher. And it really came down to the fact that there was a lip around the chandelier piece that was 4
Not
feet around,
accounted for. Yeah.
not accounted for. So, shame on me for not pushing for the site visit. But at the same time, you have to ask the questions like, is this the low point of the ceiling, or is this up in the chandelier trough? Where is your laser to? We had to get new screens brought in last minute. And in this case, we didn't charge the client because it was kind of a hotel miscommunication, but it still took time and there was labor involved in making the change. And no one likes those surprises on site. And, this client learned a valuable lesson. And, the next show we did a site visit and we've had a screaming success ever since.
Totally. Another example that comes to mind, similar, like in another hotel environment, where this was actually on the client side. They were envisioning the room to be facing one way, and then they got on site and they're like, actually, we would like to flip it around and go the opposite way, go this way to the right. And we're like, well, that's great, but now we got to switch the stage, the screens, and everything.
Hmm.
And to your point, how the ceiling wasn't flat throughout its entirety. One screen on one side was hitting this curve into the ceiling design. And the client was realizing on the moment, well, that idea was a great idea for a minute. Now it's not such a great idea when we realize that we can't fit one of the screens to fit this new flip. So, like, okay, back to original plan.
Yep.
That takes time on site, like
Yeah.
flipping things around. Plus, you also delay not just your AV production team, but also the house, because
Hmm.
they have to set up tables, they have to move them around, they have other things that need to go according to plan. So you have doors at a exact time that you
Yep.
want doors to open. And any delay like that, especially if you're sandwiched in between other events, that costs money. Not only costs money,
Absolutely.
but also can cost you valuable time on your own agenda. So to your point, so important to do a venue walkthrough, but also stick to the plan. If you
Yeah.
decided to go this way, don't just change things last minute, because it's not that easy. How
Right.
easy is to move this entire room around? Well, not that easy. I'm curious, in your experience, how important has been for you as an AV professional to collaborate with event planners in advance? And do you have any examples where you knew for a fact that the earlier the collaboration, the more significant of a difference did it make in the outcome of that event?
Yeah, several times. I mean, we are a big fan of working with event planners. We have several that handle the logistics and the hotel booking and all of the pieces that maybe AV doesn't touch. But I've had several walkthroughs where they say, "Hey, we're going to put 400 people in this room," and I put a laser to the wall, and I'm like, "Well, you're probably not. We need to open this air wall if we're going to
Without
do that."
AV, you might, but
Yeah,
if you're
right.
going to set up
So
AV,
yeah, if you don't want to stage, absolutely, we can sit 400 people in this room. And it's not a matter of them getting it wrong. It's a matter of that's not their expertise to think about. And that's why I get invited to go to these things. And I say it jokingly, but it's never a condescending conversation. It's a, hey, this may not work the way you think it does. And here's my experience. So coming to the table makes people a little less defensive. And then we come to a solution. I look at every opportunity talking with the hotel, talking with event planners, talking with the client, as we're trying to be solution oriented here. It doesn't matter whose fault it was or what the problem was. We're all coming together to have the best. We're all on the same team, is usually how I start the conversation. We're trying to come up with the best solution for the best experience. And between event planners and the hotel, often you can get a lot of local insight because there's different fire marshal laws, there's different rules. So when we talk about ground plans being as accurate as possible to the milli-inch or millimeter, it's also about the rules and regulations of the space to help guide how we have to set up the room if we can't block this door or whatever. So anytime I get the opportunity to meet with the event planner, client, hotel early, I think it saves money down the road. The more conversations that we can have across the board, your show is going to come in on budget or under because we're not getting surprises. Surprises tend to be expensive in my experience. If we're trying to solve it on site when we could have thought about it a month ago, you're going to save some dollars. Pre-production is critical. And the agency I'm with, we bring all players to the table for a pre-production meeting before we even get on site because everyone has a unique and interesting perspective of the venue, of the client's expectations, of what's going on in the hotel, loading dock situations. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I think having good relationships with everyone on the team makes us all feel like a team so we can communicate and solve issues instead of being the event planners against the agencies against the hotel. That mentality does not lead to a successful production, in my opinion. We all have to work in the same sandbox, and it's better if we can be friends. Ultimately, most of the people that I work with, we have a blast doing it because we're coming to the table with solutions and not problems.
Totally. What is your value prop that you use with your clients, especially when it's an out-of-town event or maybe requires some traveling to, and for a client to approve the expense that it takes to do a venue walkthrough? Sometimes that can be, a bit of a fight. Like it takes a person to actually travel to the venue way in advance. We're talking about
Mhm.
months in advance to do the proper venue walkthrough that we're recommending, and we're both agreeing that is absolutely necessary. Do you have any tips for anyone that still struggles and they're like, yeah, we try really hard for our clients to buy that, but many times it's a shot in the dark?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest advice I can give is limit to essential personnel. So, our typical site visit is an executive producer and a technical director. So, we're only traveling two people from our team traditionally, unless there's more pieces to it like expo or immersive design, and in which case we might need another producer. But we try and show the value of that site visit by saying, yes, there's some upfront costs, but here's our experience of things that have happened because we haven't had a site visit, right? The things we're talking about is maybe the hotel's renovated. Maybe the hotel's moved chandeliers. Maybe the hotel's changed something about the space. Often in our case, our clients are already pretty invested in the project. So it's a little bit easier to have the conversation because they want to have a successful, sometimes very large event. I think in general, it's just about phrasing it as this is the avenue to have the most successful event. And I always try and preempt it, meaning right at the first meeting with the client, when are we scheduling the site visit? So that the expectations are clear. It's not a surprise meeting number 4 or 5. Hey, we'd really like to meet in person. We'd like to walk through the venue with you, and we'd like to present some design ideas. I often bring the renderings and ground plans to that site visit because it helps people visualize in the space. So I think my key factors are let's talk about the design in the space. That'll help you kind of put your mind to it. You're going to save money in the long run. And most importantly, it's a small team and it's a small investment up front, but it's an expectation up front.
Totally. Do you feel like there's certain budget that certain events fall within where when it comes to renderings, you feel like there's a cap, like a meeting for, I don't know, 1,000 people that would not invest as much into an event rendering or event design or anything of that sort versus a, say, Zoomtopia or some other type of internal company meeting based on who the brand is, based on what the budget is? Is there some kind of a line where you've seen certain event budgets that go over this much? Those are the ones that will afford a thoughtful rendering?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of projects where we kind of use a mood board and then do technical drawings and don't do a full photographic ready rendering for. And I would say those are the south of, I don't want to give too specific, but let's say under 100 grand. They're more looking for a concept and it's a little more rear projection and drape and then an atomic design in the middle. And we're talking more in a little vaguer terms because they're newer to events for the most part. But in general, I think a technical drawing is a non-negotiable because again, it's that treasure map that gets all teams aligned. That's not necessarily an upfront charge from us. The drawings are kind of a cost of doing business to a certain extent. The more visually stimulating renderings and changing seating charts and that kind of stuff, there's some financial implications there. But for the most part, I would say everyone appreciates being able to visualize, and it's not something that we typically charge a lot of money for. It's more about that's kind of the business of doing it. So we're a big advocate of right out the gate setting expectations that this is the kind of stuff you're going to see from us. And it is very different from, and I've worked in several different arenas, being a business owner of an AV company for years, freelancing for years, and then being at an agency on and off for years. Agencies have a lot more opportunity to be creative because that's usually what we're being engaged for. AV vendors tend to have to show reference images of previous work to try and get the concept across. There's a lot of clients that can't read technical drawings, which is okay. It's not their job
Yeah.
to, but between the picture and the drawing, most people can put it together.
And most technical drawings, I feel like they're actually a backup for the AV production house to make sure that they're setting up appropriately and they're avoiding some of the challenges that come on
Absolutely.
site without one. In your
Absolutely.
experience, as you mentioned and alluded to being a small business owner yourself in the prior years, what were maybe some of the biggest challenges that you faced and you felt like you had to overcome? If you remember any examples or anything that is worth mentioning.
Well, I say this a lot. My superpower these days is to translate the technical to non-technical people. And I would say that my challenge early on, especially in my younger years, was doing that in a way that's not condescending and is not building defenses and more about sharing what they want to know. Like,
Mhm.
I'll use LED walls, for example. If I get into the refresh rate and the pitch rate and all of that kind of stuff, it might just blast right over someone's head because it's not their job to know. But if I say this is going to look a lot better on camera if it's under 2.9 pitch because of these reasons, I think my biggest challenge was framing how I converse about technology in a way that people care about so that they're willing to spend the money and trust me on it. I think in general, how we communicate as AV vendors, to your point earlier about verbiage and how we communicate, there's a lot of grouchy techs out there. I mean, I think that's the thing I've overcome the most in my career is that people assume that you're going to be surly and grouchy if they say the video guy's coming over to talk. And all of the teams that I've worked with over the years, our goal was to be as inviting and friendly to clients so that they can best understand what they're paying for. And a great example of that is I borrow this from a friend is when we were talking about multiple screens, I use this a lot where I say, do you want to see 4 different horses on 4 different screens or do you want to see the horse run across all 4 screens? And when you give them something visual to latch onto that doesn't talk about video matrixing and all of the ins and outs and all of that, they can latch onto that idea and say, yes, I want it to animate across all of the screens. Great. Now we know what we're working with and we know what equipment to put there.
Which is a completely different setup than 4 different
Yes.
horses on 4
Yeah.
screens.
Yes. So finding things like that and then just assuring clients and producers and event planners, like I'm not the jerk of an AV guy that you've maybe worked with in the past. I'm on your team. I want to have a conversation. I always say there are no stupid questions, just stupid people that don't ask questions. There's nothing you can ask me that I'm going to give you any sort of grief about. I want to make sure you're understanding to the depth that you need to or want to understand the process. And it goes back to being solution oriented is I'm not there to have an argument about it. I'm not there to tell you that you're stupid or that I'm smarter than you. Here's what the limitations or the positives of the arrangement that you've created. And here's what we can do with it.
Totally. Before we get into creating immersive experiences, I want to just take a quick moment to thank our amazing sponsor.
Before we continue, I want to give a shout out to the team at TreeFan Events. We are not just an event planning and production agency. We are focused on integrating innovative AV solutions, AI strategies, and wellness-focused practices through our Fit for Events framework. Whether you're planning live, virtual, or hybrid events, the team at TreeFan Events is here to provide personalized planning, strategic design, and seamless technology management to ensure everything runs flawlessly. And now, we are offering AI-powered workshops to help you grow your business, build stronger teams, and elevate your events to the next level. If you want to learn more about how the team at TreeFan Events can help make your event unforgettable, visit treefanevents.com.
And with that, question for you, because I want to move the conversation a little bit into how do you go beyond just setting up equipment? Like the job of an AV production company is to get on site, get all the equipment set up the right way, make sure everything works flawlessly. But how do you go beyond that to create immersive experiences that attendees will truly remember long after the event is over?
Yeah, I mean, first, it's all about how the attendees feel. That's what they're going to remember more than any content. It's the experience of walking in and what the emotional connection is. And I think the easiest way to answer that question is something I've been preaching for a long time on the agency level, and it's really started to take is our AV vendors are partners. They need to be brought in sooner. They need to express their creativity because they're experts in their field. So we can have a discussion about all of the things that are possible within budget. Because I'm very good at what I do, but there are people that are better than me at some of these production companies that could have great ideas. So I think the first and foremost is engaging any AV vendor as a partner so they can understand what you're trying to accomplish in the production and give the best technology for the best price to solve whatever you're trying to solve. And as an agency, we have tons of vendors that we love to work with, and we bring them in as early as humanly possible because they're going to give us the right gear at the right price. The other piece of that is understanding your client and what they're trying to accomplish and the feelings that they want their audience to leave with. I say this often, we're truck door open to truck door close, meaning we embed with the marketing team of the client, and we're there through all of their iterations of branding, etc., most of the time. And we really want to be there from start to finish, meaning we're not just there to provide the equipment. We're not just there to provide drawings. We're there to do speaker coaching, branding, creative. Like we're in a lot of ways a one-stop shop. And that makes it easier to get to know the client because they want to spend time with us and we can align on what the goals are. I mean, something that is maybe more common in agencies, but I've seen it more frequently in my agency is we do audience analysis. What kind of audience is coming? What are their likes and dislikes? We try and get as much information about the attendee so that we can design an experience that they're really comfortable with.
Well, with designing those type of experiences, I feel like there's also a lot of waste that has to be talked about. Sustainability in AV production and event design is a big topic. How
Mhm.
do you incorporate sustainable practices in your event designs and even AV setups that you get
Yeah.
involved with?
Well, I think there's a couple things to that. The first is reusability. There's a great product on the market called AV Drop. I've used it a lot, where you're reusing skins and surfaces to build interesting and creative shapes, but it's the same product. So you're not reprinting or redesigning.
Mm.
And then we do a lot of projection mapping on that. The other thing I always say is LED might be more expensive, but it's going to be less of a footprint because we're not throwing away a lot of fabric or a lot of hard surface material that needs to be trashed or recycled. But the biggest thing I say to clients is, can we use it for more than one event? Can we use it for multiple years? Is this a piece that we can design that can go on the road for your road shows? Just finding multi-use cases for the product. I'm not a big fan of one-time use and throw it away. And I have a great example of that just recently. We built a product wall experience for a client and they were like, we don't want to keep it. And then they saw it and fell in love with it. And now it's permanently installed in their venues. So we didn't have to throw all of that stuff away. And it was due to the sustainability conversation that our creatives and our team had, which is we really don't want to throw all of this product away. And I think you can reuse it. And I think it's a really beautiful piece. Designing intentionally in that respect, designing modularly so that it can be broken down, stored, shipped, and done in the most cost effective way possible, I think is critical. It really comes down to what the best savings are. Like I say, LED is a great option because you can have multiple backdrops. You can change it to just about anything and you're not having to recreate or create actual product. Now, that three-dimensional piece, that does have an impact on set designs and they can make them look really cool, but I suggest to all AV vendors that they do it in a way that they might be able to use pieces of it on the next project, even if it's a different client. So that modularization, that's a tough word, modularization of whatever your scenic options are to still make them feel custom, but you're not rebuilding or creating new with new material every time, I think is going to be the future. And we're kind of already there to a certain extent.
I agree. And then having a budget for all of those sustainable practices, because I think a lot of clients, they definitely care about it. But when it comes to the cost of using a different material that is more sustainable or different material because it's friendlier for the planet, and then they look at the bottom line, they're like, whoa, wait a second. This is so much more than what initially we had. And then another thought here is sometimes agencies that especially get involved in a lot of the set design creation and all the elements that get built for an event, you end up having this mini warehouse that you have
Yes.
to
Yeah.
store a lot of this able to reuse. How do you handle that? Now you gotta have to keep an inventory. You have to
Mhm.
know what goes in and what goes out and what can be reused and for how long, for how many turns. Because sometimes things do get damaged in transport.
Sure.
And then being able to have that entire little operation just for the purpose of being sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to again the vendor partner thing, at least from an agency perspective, is our AV vendors that may be involved in the construction of the scenic often store those pieces for us. And then it kind of ensures that they'll work on the project the next year. So there's kind of some benefit for them in being a part of that process with us. But I would certainly say it's not perfect yet. And to the bottom line conversation, it really does come down to getting to know your clients and their priorities. A lot of clients are emphasizing sustainability and they'll find more money
Lip
for it.
service in the beginning, but then, like you say, you have to back it up with
Yeah.
funds because otherwise
Yeah.
it's just good intentions, but no action.
Yeah, and I think again, setting expectations of pricing whatever that's going to be early. I'm a big advocate of starting the process with this. Sustainability can be an expensive venture. Let's look at the numbers and make sure it fits into your budget before we get too far down the road. And maybe we need to redesign to fit that. And there's a lot of pieces that go into design, as you know. It is not just one team of creative, vomiting out of their brain exactly what they want. It has to be a communication between client, technical, even broaching the sustainability topic, and then we design to fit, check as many boxes as we can.
I mean, that in itself, Jacob, I feel like it can be a different conversation altogether. I was having an interview with another guest, and we were talking about just what it takes to corral the chaos when it comes to getting all creatives to work together because they all
Herding
have
cats.
different ways, yes, of
Yeah.
expressing themselves. And the reason why you're a creative is because you are some kind of a special individual in your own unique way. But then getting everyone to work together when you have a big project, that's a different conversation. That takes the different
Yeah.
skill set and special talent altogether. Which brings me to a conversation about the behind the scene work, the behind the scene teams that often don't get enough credit. What's one aspect of your work that you think people might not realize, but it's essential to the success of an event?
Well, I mean, this is kind of what we started on when we first started talking about this is the difference between hotel seating charts and ground plans, being as efficient and precise as possible and being good stewards of the client's budget. They're not looking at that as something that's like a value add or as much of a value add as it should be. If you can let them know that this number of seats is not going to fit and you can't sell that many tickets, or the opposite, you can fit another 100 people in here and sell 100 more tickets, that's a value add that is kind of like looked over a little bit. And I think that's a big part of doing accurate drawings and having conversations with the space about what will actually work. And to me, that's like, oh, well, they'll just whip out another drawing. I think it's a really important piece of it. And it's something I've written articles about and we've talked about
Well, I know you
precision of
have
that
some hot
drawing.
takes when it
Yeah.
comes to hotel layouts versus actual rendering. So I
Yeah.
want to hear more about that.
Yeah. And I don't mean to come across as insulting to any software or anybody's workflow or anything like that. But there is a difference in precision, and there is a place for using softwares that are not vectored, that are not industry standard, at putting together seating charts and general layouts before we get on site so that we can look at what the hotel is thinking is possible. And for some events, it works great. But I think the more complex the AV, or the more complex the design, and the better the experience you want for your attendees, the better the software needs to be.
The more
Yeah,
precise.
yeah, and I'm a big Vectorworks advocate. I think it should be used on everything. There's a lot of people that are big AutoCAD fans. As long as there's a precision to it and you do it well, the thing I love about Vectorworks is it has a lot of built-in industry standard symbols for a lot of the equipment. And I see very often a box that just says stage on it that doesn't have any dimensions, and a projector that the screen's not the right size.
You
They're
mean
like,
that's
"Oh, this is great."
the general layout that you get from the
Yeah,
hotel on a BEO that now
yeah.
you're gonna have to build around?
Yes, yes. To a certain extent, it's like playing with clip art. It's the difference between Microsoft Paint and Adobe softwares.
But we come a
Like,
long ways. We come a long ways since those days. So I
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
there's some wins to be had.
certainly. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that could be said about that. I think the challenge is when people say this is always how we've done it, and that kills creativity and kills the ability to come up with the best solution. If it's always how
Absolutely.
you've done it, and the room is 4 feet shorter than your drawing has, or it's 20
Or
feet
there's
longer,
no ceiling dimensions at all
right? Right.
altogether to begin with, and they're just gonna have to imagine or do that walkthrough to make sure that you see
Yeah.
what's in person versus what's on the layout. But to your point, there's definitely value to
Mhm.
having a in-house Vectorworks that knows how to draw a proper rendering. However, most venues don't have that in-house, nor do agencies or event planners. So how do we consolidate, like having a Vectorworks subscription? That's a lot of money as well for a lot of agencies to invest into, unless they get the ROI back from the event work that they do that really justifies the use of a expensive software as such.
Yeah.
So how do you blend those two worlds where you could do a regular meeting with social tables layout, as long as you have some accurate understanding of your setup, but also you have the visual of where you're walking into. But there's definitely a lot of events that do not fall in that category if they're larger, if there's a whole general session that has so many multiple pieces that it's not even comprehensive enough to put on that layout.
Well, I think something that's hugely beneficial, and I'm not trying to make this a Vectorworks commercial here, but they have gone to a monthly
Do they give
cancel
you a
anytime
kickback
subscription.
just so we know?
Not yet, but I'm hoping after this. But a lot of freelancers carry that monthly subscription, so I think it actually comes down to hiring the right staff for the show.
Mm,
Is having a freelance TD that's able and willing to do the drawings for you. And a lot of the time, those people all talk. All those drafters, they kind of share a database to a certain extent of venues that they've drawn before. And I think tapping into that, if you can meet a few of
mhm.
them, I know we all talk, and there's Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups. And when I have an urgent issue where, let's say, I'm in Puerto Rico and I can't do a site visit, hey, have you been here? Do you have any drawings? Do you have any renderings that I can, like, delete all your client stuff from it? Can I just have your file?
Right.
9 out of 10 times they'll say yes. I think that not having to pay that huge, it is a pretty upfront cost for Vectorworks for the whole year. But if you have a project that's going to last 60 days, 90 days, you just pay for those 3 months. And I think it's worth its weight in gold, because, again, you're going to have less surprises on site, and you can be as accurate as humanly possible. You can always hire a drafter. There's plenty of freelancers that'll do it for a 2 hour minimum at a reasonable price. Or you get a TD that has his own subscription that's monthly, and they charge you a little bit for their monthly subscription, but then you get incredibly accurate drawings. We should take it out of the mindset of the event planner needs to buy the software for it to be usable. There's
If
so
they're
many
not even
people.
gonna know how to use it, why not tap
Right,
into the pool of people, the resources
right.
that, like you mentioned, that's the golden nugget there, because
Yeah,
maybe that's what event planners don't realize. There's actually TDs, there's event professionals in the AV space that carry those subscriptions because that's part of their
yeah,
job description to
yep.
be able to render appropriate design layouts.
Yeah, and there are so many excellent drafters. Not to be too egotistical, I'm a pretty good drafter, but there are people that have mentored me that are even better. And there are some people that that's all they do is drafting. They draft for a number of companies. You pick up the phone or email them and say, hey, I have an event in this room with 300 people. Here's the concept. Like I said, I'll draw it a little bit on a napkin, and they go. Because my agency does upwards of 60 shows a year, I couldn't possibly do all of the drawings accurately every time, especially for the multi-million dollar projects where we have 10, 15 rooms, give or take, or we're in a giant stadium and there's a lot of opportunity for freelancers to come in. I still manage the drawings, but I let them do the initial work and then I can change it from there. I do think everyone should have at least a basic knowledge of how to draft in the event space. And it's something I picked up in theater when I was learning to hand draft, and then AutoCAD, and then Vectorworks. There's so much good training out there between YouTube and between Vectorworks itself. There's a whole educational program that can get you up to speed pretty quickly. I've had a couple employees go through that training, and then it's them coming to me asking questions to learn the shortcuts and the tricks that I've learned over the 15 years I've been drafting. But a base knowledge, I think, can serve you very well. At the very least, learning to read a ground plan. There's a lot of folks that on the client side don't care, but I think they should, and it would help them immensely if they could read the floor plan.
Totally. Now, for someone that's interested in breaking into AV or the event production field, especially those interested in the technical and creative aspect of event renderings, what other advice would you give them aside from the resources that you just mentioned?
So I would always recommend looking up your local production and AV companies and just reaching out. They're not necessarily going to pay you a ton of money right out the gate, but if you work hard and you have a good attitude, I mean, I started as the lowest man on the totem pole, both in the production company and in the agency world, and then I was director of production pretty couple years after that. I think learn as much as you can from any avenue you can, whether that's church AV, theater. All of those skills are valuable and can be refined, but it really comes down to be willing to work long hours, have a good attitude. Events are not easy. I think I just posted something that said we don't do this because it's easy, but because we thought it would be easy.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh my gosh, I think my husband sent me that. It was like a banner on the back of a
yeah,
stage.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, thanks.
And the thing that I recommend the most is don't specialize too early. You can say you want to be a video guy, but take lighting calls, take audio calls, even if it's a stagehand call and you're just learning how to put the thing together. The more experience and more fields that you can have as someone who started a lighting guy and had to crash course video, I think that's going to make you a stronger technician down the road and give you more skills and more flexibility of where you end up. There is an AV company in every city, good, bad, or otherwise. There's an AV company in every city. You can at least get your foot in the door there. And then the freelance conversation of if you get some experience and you start making some contacts, get out on the road. I think that's the thing that shaped my career the most, was being on tour for a long period of time, corporate tours, not rock and roll tours, but seeing all of the different venues and all of the different vendors and working with different AV vendors. There are some industry standards, but there are some unique differences that I've learned over the years working with different companies, and some I take and some I don't, but it all helps me learn my best practices and my best systems.
And I think that's where it comes down to the conversation of also of how welcoming do we make this space for everyone to join. Because I mean, sure, I'll get on the road, but I also happen to be a mom and have a family, and that's just not conducive for
Right.
life work integration of any sort. I'm not even calling it balance because it's
Right.
truly not. There's no balance there. So it could be a great opportunity for someone, but it could also be a great deterrent for someone else. So
Certainly.
starting where you are and looking at the options around and opportunities around you. And I love that you mentioned churches. Churches have some great productions, especially
Yeah.
larger worship centers,
Mhm.
great production teams that you can learn a lot. And they are in need of volunteers all day
Absolutely.
long. And then, as you mentioned, I started my way into AV production, coiling cables. And from there,
Mhm.
I ended up mixing sound for some great A-listers.
Mhm.
You got to start somewhere if you're passionate about this industry. But as mentioned several times over, it's not going to be easy. But we're not here because it's easy. We're not here because we're making tons of money. It's because we
Right.
really have a passion for it and we really, really are invested. And if that's your path, it will call to you and you're going to find a way. And then for us, the ones that have been in the industry for a while, make it welcoming for others, and then being able to share and being able to advise and mentor the new people that are coming into the industry is just as important. As we are coming to a close here and we're thinking to the future of AV production, event technology, set design, are there any upcoming trends or technologies that you're particularly excited about?
I've seen some really cool stuff in the laser LED projection space where the LED wall matches what's going on with the projector or the laser. And it's just made for a really unique experience. I think the more people that understand LED technology, the more we'll push that. So, not just having an LED wall, but potentially an LED floor and really making it an immersive experience. We've done a couple designs where LED banners have gone into the audience and into the floor of the audience, and
Mm,
they can walk over it, and it makes them feel like they're a part of the staging. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to do with LED and maybe the combination of LED and projection. And then the door is just wide open as far as doing cool stuff. I mean, it's really using some old technology mixed in with some new technology. It's hard to pinpoint one exact thing, but would say that all of the technology is getting lighter, more affordable, easier to use in a lot of respects. So I think you're going to see a lot of people that have done traditional rear projection screens get into the LED space. And I think that's going to be something that A is sustainable and B is going to be very cool because you're going to see people that are kind of creating their own stuff kind of non-traditionally, but they're going to make it work because that's what we do, and you're going to get to see some really cool experiences because of it. And to your
I've also
comment of
seen
oh,
some weird, like wind-powered LED projection. I'm not exactly sure what the technical term is of that.
something I've seen that could really change the game in a lot of respects. I haven't seen it done. I've only seen one company do it successfully, but mounting solar panels to festival stages to charge the stage while they're
That's
driving,
good.
so we
Yeah.
no longer need generators for long periods of
That's
time.
speak to the sustainability of
Yeah.
LED production trends. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a weight issue with the batteries, but I think they're using different coils now. So it's just a really interesting market. It was something I thought kicked around starting a company for a little while on is like, how do you go solar for more of production, especially in the festival outdoor space? And the idea of your trailer stage is charging while it's driving to the next city is a really
Right.
interesting proposition. And I can't remember the name of the company, but I've seen one who does it really well. And I think they're the industry standard for it, but I'd love to see more of it. And on the sustainability front, I think people are a little afraid of the upfront costs, as we all are,
Mhm.
but we've got to push the envelope a little bit. It goes back to that we've always done it this way. Festivals have always been done this way.
Yeah.
Great, but let's try something different. And I think we need to get over that fear as a collective and try new things that are potentially more sustainable and could have a longer term success.
But it's also, I feel like a little bit of hesitation. Is this the right timing to
Yeah.
invest? Because the technology is developing so fast, and what might have been trending a couple of years ago is no longer trending now or up to date because it's changed. Something comes to mind is some of my friends, they all invested in panels for their houses. Only 2 or 3 years later now, they are no longer functioning because the technology that they were built on is extinct. So now they've got all the solar panels on their house that do nothing. Well, that was a great investment of money and resources, only it does not help with anything down the road. So there's definitely a bit of timing. This is the right time. Where is the technology going? How much farther is it going to go before I'm going to put a bunch of money behind it to
Yeah.
support this upgrade?
And from a client's perspective, does it risk the show? Like that's all new technology. When we started switching from consoles to laptop controls or touchscreen interfaces, people wanted a solid old school wide audio mixer, for example. And now
Right.
there's digital mixers that are great. It does take time.
And
We
there was
have
a
to make,
gray area in
yeah,
between where,
yeah,
we all had a console crash in the middle of a
yes,
show, having to reset
absolutely,
it. Those two
absolutely.
minutes were the longest minutes of our lives.
Right, right. And yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing with technological advancements in general. Events are hard on technology. We have to proof stuff out and we have to, I say, hit them with a baseball bat a little bit to make sure they don't fail in the worst moments possible. So it is a balancing act, but I'm excited to see what comes in the future.
I love that conversation, Jacob. If you could leave our audience with one thought regarding AV production, your role as a creative, anything that has to do with successful events and experiences, what would that be?
I think you alluded to it, is find a way to be a mentor, find a way to help people get into the industry. It was a very, even for me, young coming in, I was the young kid and there was old timers pushing cases. This is how we've always done it. I think being, to your point, more open and inviting. And I use the example, I teach at Boise State University of lighting design, and there's students that have a path that want to follow projection mapping. And they hired me as a adjunct because I have event experience outside of theater, giving people the opportunity to find the thing that excites them and not make it such a closed door thing. And I think about like rock and roll touring, like you really have to be at the right place at the right time to get at a high level on touring.
Right.
Give the opportunities that you got, or give more opportunities that you got. And then as far as successful events, really know what the client's trying to accomplish and meet their expectations, and have the conversation openly about what does success look like for your event. And that's a conversation I haven't seen a lot until I got into owning my own company and the agency world. If we all have the same idea of what a successful event looks like, it really makes the post conversation much easier. If ever no one's talking about what a successful event is it ROI? Is it jazzing up your teams to go get X amount of sales? Know what success looks like and what do you want your audience leaving and talking about. It's hard to measure something you don't talk about. So talk about the success of what the success of your event looks like before you even get in the door.
Because you're right, everybody has different measuring sticks and different ROI and ROEs and measures that they want to get out of it, and metrics. And it can be hard to quantify what's important when everybody brings to the table their own version of what success looks like. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. Where can our audience find you if they want to learn more about your work, also get in touch for maybe some mentoring, things that you say you're available for? I mean, you just had a baby. I'm sure you have plenty of time for all the other extra things.
The 13-month is just sleeping through the night now. So now I have all my nights free again. Not exactly. LinkedIn is a big place for me. I think that the network is huge. And if you find me there, it's Jacob W.P. Ramey. You can find me on LinkedIn. My connections, most of them would be more than willing to connect as well. So let's have a conversation, message me. And if I'm not the right person, I can point you in the right direction. Something I have pride myself on in the industry is I always know a person. I'm not going to say guy. I always know a person in the industry that can help or educate and has either done it before or knows someone who has.
From now on until the end of times, you're going to be aware of that. So that means I did my job well, Jacob.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we all make mistakes, but I think it's owning it and learning from it. Like, great conversation piece, because it is a perspective that I don't necessarily have joining the industry as a white male, but it's not just gender inequality.
It's not. Absolutely.
It's all phases of giving everyone an opportunity to be in this industry that we love. So I'm not offended at all. I think it was a great call out and something I need to improve on and continue to work on.
Well, I'm super glad that you don't take offense, and I'm glad that I could help with something as well. And with that, thank you so much for this conversation. That's a wrap for today's episode. Make sure that you connect with Jacob on LinkedIn. And if you have any need to get some venue diagrams, or maybe AV production, or who knows, lighting, event design, and all the things, make sure that you DM him. And if you enjoyed this episode, do subscribe, share it with your network, leave us a review. And as always, stay curious. Until next time, keep creating unforgettable event experiences. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to review it, rate it, and share it with other event professionals that could benefit from it. Connect with us on social at EventsDemystified Podcast. We would love to hear from you and what you're up to. If you'd like to learn more about pre-fan event services and find out if we're a good fit in supporting your event, can we help your event be successful with a 20-minute free consultation? Link in the episode's notes. Thanks for tuning in.